Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the community meeting to discuss the potential rezoning of part of the Lakewood Shopping Center. My name is Anil Ghosh. I am an attorney with the Morningstar Law Group here in Durham. Also with me tonight is Dan Jewell with Thomas and Hutton, which is the land planning firm that has been engaged on this project. We are representing Brody Co., which is the owner of a portion of the Lakewood Shopping Center. Brody Co. is a small family-owned company based in Eastern North Carolina that has been around for more than 2 decades. They also have some ties to Durham. Like many, their vice president fell in love with Durham when he attended Duke. I believe he actually lived nearby and visited this shopping center back then from time to time. Before I begin, I did just want to go over a few housekeeping items. I know there is a lot of interest in the project, so I want to try to get to as many people as possible. We are using the Zoom platform tonight. After a brief presentation, I will open the floor for questions and comments. If you are on Zoom, you can use the raise hand function if you have a question or comment, and I can acknowledge you that way. Or if you prefer not to speak, you can also type your question or comment in the Q&A section. For any call-in users, and I think I see a few, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 to let us know that you would like the floor. I will recognize one person at a time, so please try not to be repetitive as there are many people who've joined tonight. I also will switch back and forth from raised hands to type questions and comments. If any of the type questions or comments, or for example, have already been discussed, I may skip over them in the interest of efficiency. Also, please note that this is not your only opportunity to speak with me about the project. If you get a notice from me, my direct contact information is on it. Please feel free to email or call me in the future to discuss the project. And finally, I want to caveat that we are early in the process. We have not yet submitted anything to the city for this rezoning. We may not necessarily have enough information to answer every question, but we certainly will try. So I will tell you a little bit about the project. The first thing to understand is that this request deals with only a portion of the overall Lakewood Shopping Center, not the whole thing. So to orient folks, the shopping center runs north-south, with the north end being towards House Avenue and the south end being towards Chapel Hill Road. The rezoning request includes the section of the shopping center essentially from Chapel Hill Road going north from there to where the inline shops used to be just north of Food Lion. So I guess like Freeman's Creative, El Centro, Scrap Exchange, none of that is part of the rezoning request. I should also note that the building where Lula and Sadie's is also is not part of the request, neither is the Lakewood Social. Secondly, I want to explain my client's vision for Lakewood and the challenges they face. I like to think of Lakewood today as kind of two parts. On the one hand, you have a lot of community resources, places where people go for support. You have the Scrap Exchange, Food Pantry, Freeman's Creative, El Centro, El Futuro, Lincoln Community Health, etc. Right? You have all of that. And on the other hand, Lakewood is a retail center. You got Bright Black, Dollar General, Food Line, Beauty World, all of those things. But the shopping center has been in decline, and there really hasn't been any significant investment put into the overall center for decades. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance, and it shows. Brody Co. hopes to give this center the injection it needs for it to be viable for many more decades. If you all visit the shopping center, I'm sure you've seen that Food Line has done a little to refresh the space. And that's because Food Line will continue to be here, at least in the short term. Our understanding is that this is a marginally performing store for Food Lion, but Brody Co. understands that it plays an important role in this community. So Brody Co. hopes to reinvigorate the center to entice Food Lion to stay here in the long term. In the context of redeveloping the site, what that means is creating modern retail spaces. Physically, modern retail spaces are smaller than before. The trend started with the proliferation of online shopping, but the pandemic really kicked it into high gear. In addition to deferred maintenance and things like that, the existing retail spaces at Lakewood they simply are too large, or I should say, really, they're too deep specifically for modern retailers and restaurants. So Brody Co. wants to create more viable modern retail space that are less deep. The overall width of the shopping center would remain generally the same as it is today, but redeveloping the site will allow them to right size the retail spaces. And I think at this point, uh, I bet some folks are probably wondering, so why self storage, or what does this have to do with self storage? I am going to pull up a conceptual layout to illustrate, and I want to reiterate that this is conceptual only, but I do think it will help explain the thinking here. So if you'll give me a second. Uh, Dan, can you see that? Or what are you seeing?
I see the site plan, Neil.
Okay. All right, sorry. All right, so in this layout, you can see that the new retail spaces here are, roughly 1/3 of the depth of the existing food line space, and these represent the smaller modern retail spaces I mentioned earlier. And you can see that by reducing the depth of the retail space, there is a building opportunity created behind the southernmost building closest to Chapel Hill Road. This is the section envisioned for self storage. And when I say self storage, I mean indoor climate controlled self storage, not rows of single story roll up garage doors on wavy pavement. Um, in our estimation, self storage makes a lot of sense here. In addition to providing a service used by the community, this allows Brody Co. to recapitalize the property while maintaining the center as a primarily retail location. Additionally, self storage is a low traffic, low intensity, low utility use. So the center will not be overburdened by this new use, but this will create another kind of anchor that will give the shopping center more stability in the long run. As you can see, the idea is to have multi-story self-storage. The multi-story self-storage used to be somewhat integrated with the ground level retail front of the building. I have another conceptual image that I will share. One second. Dan, are you seeing that one?
I am. I'm seeing the 3 elevations.
All right. So as you can see, and I want to reiterate that this is conceptual, but it does give you a better sense of what that might look like. So what this illustrates is that from the front, what folks will see are, some very familiar looking retail spaces kind of north of the food line, or maybe I can show this image. This is kind of how it will lay out on the site. Food line remaining in the exact location that it is. And so what you'll see from the front, you'll have these kind of modern retail spaces, the food line where it exists today, and then south of that, after there will be this kind of driveway, I suppose. South of the food line, though, what you will have are the multi-story buildings. The ground level of that building looks like the other new retail space. The upper stories, they don't look like self-storage in the front. In my opinion, they look a little bit more like offices. So that kind of gives you an idea of the flavor here. So I want to switch back to this layout that I showed earlier, which is conceptual. Incorporated in this refresh is a much needed overhaul of the parking lot. Today, it is patchy, cracked, and perhaps most detrimentally, it is unobstructed. We have heard that folks do, burnouts or race to this parking lot from time to time. So we want to fix up the paving itself, but also adjust the layout to make it less convenient for those types of things. This includes adding some more plantings to the parking lot, new lights, and real sidewalks. In order to accomplish this vision, we are proposing to rezone this area from its current commercial center zoning to commercial general. The only real change in use that we are seeking here is to allow self-storage, which is not allowed under the current zoning. But everything else we're talking about is allowed under both zoning districts. And as I explained, it really is that self-storage use which allows the owners to make the necessary level of investment to bring the center up to a modern market expectation and keep it viable for years to come. Now, I'm just one person, but I think, in my view, this is a fairly innovative approach to revitalizing an existing shopping center. Brody Co. owns only a portion of the center, but they have come up with a plan that will benefit the center as a whole. Their vision is to keep Lakewood as a shopping center rather than to turn it into something entirely different altogether. Ultimately, this allows the center to continue to serve the community in the way it currently does and in the way it has been for some time. It remains both a center for shopping and support. It maintains the food line as a central tenant and as an important food source for this neighborhood. And it also addresses some tangential issues by cleaning up the parking lot. So that's kind of my overview of the project. I've done a lot of talking. Let me see if my colleague Dan wants to add anything to that.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Neil. No, I think you covered it well. We have heard over the years that it's been critically important to keep food line in place because it is one of the few semi-affordable opportunities for food in the neighborhood. So I was pretty excited when Vertico came up with a way to put a little more cash infusion into the revenue with climate control storage and still be able to upgrade the center and give it more life because it was literally opened in 1962. You can go on Open Durham and find the ribbon cutting on there. So yeah, I hope folks will agree that this is going to be a good thing. And Neil, I expect people are interested in hearing what the process is going to be, which I'm sure you're going to cover next.
Yeah, so following this neighborhood meeting, we're going to prepare a report of this meeting, and then we plan to submit the rezoning application. It will go to the city at that point. And I don't know that we have a specific date by which we're going to submit. But once we submit, it goes into a review process with the city to make sure that everything is technically on par with the application requirements. So there's going to be some maybe back and forth with the city about that. And then after that, at some point, the application will be deemed complete and we go into the public hearing process. For any rezoning, there's going to be at least 2 more public hearings. That will be one with the Planning Commission and then another one with the City Council. The rezoning process, I would say it takes 9 to 12 months. Generally speaking, it can take longer. And sorry about that. And so there'll be some other opportunities to speak publicly about this. But as I said earlier, I encourage you to reach out to me directly in the meantime if you have questions. All right, so I see we have some questions and comments in the Q&A. I'll start there. We also have some hands up as well. One person mentioned that there were no interpretation options on the screen. I will note that that was at 6:01. And as I understand it, the interpretation, after Felipe gave his instructions, I turned the interpretation services on. So if you'll let me know if that appeared after that or not, that would be helpful, but I hope that the interpretation service was available. And someone asked why the chat is disabled. I'm not monitoring the chat, so I can't really answer that question, I see someone else said, can you please turn on the chat? Well, it looks like the chat is working because the interpretation is up and running perfect. I just got that message from Felipe in the chat. But just to be clear, I don't know how to operate, all of the features on Zoom. So I'm sorry that if the chat is disabled, it appears to be working. Someone asked if I could tell how many people are on this call. At the moment, there are 181 attendees. Someone mentioned that the food line is really important to the community, and we have heard that definitely. And if I hadn't made it clear already, I want to reiterate, Food Lion is not part of the redevelopment that Brody Co is pursuing. Food Lion is going to be part of the project at the end of the day. They want the Food Lion there, and really they are designing a project that will help Food Lion stay here longer. Someone asked if I could show a picture of the area to be rezoned. I did that earlier, and I'm happy to do it again if I need to. But in the interest of time, I'll just keep going. And they also asked for a drawing, which we showed that as well. So, hi, thank you for holding a community meeting. I live in Lakewood and often go to Lakewood multiple times a week. Food and church are staples for me. Okay, I appreciate that. Someone said no investment in the shopping center by the owner. Okay, I think I mentioned that. I mean, there hasn't been any significant investment that I'm aware of in the Lakewood Shopping Center, like in the overall shopping center, in quite some time. And I mean, certainly there have been tenants who have moved in or out and that type of thing, but the parking lot, the area just really hasn't been overhauled or really much of any significant level of investment to keep this center viable. Are you looking to expand restaurants or healthy spaces? Self-storage hardly seems healthy. I don't know what is meant by that. The intent here is to create new retail spaces, so there would be, in theory, there would be new tenants that aren't currently there, would have a place for to establish their business. The self-storage component of it is kind of limited to the rear section of the property, or rear section of the shopping center, I should say, and is kind of an add-on to really help with keeping the long-term stability of the overall center. How tall will the self-storage be and how many stories? Yeah, so the self-storage I think it's going to be in the 35, 40-foot range. How many stories? I'm not exactly sure. I think there's some grade, so that there might be half a story below grade or something like that, but it's going to be like a 40-foot tall building.
Neil, can I interject one thing?
Sure.
I know folks are interested in the Food Lion, and also there was a question about the investment in the this portion of the center. So Brody Co actually bought this out of foreclosure. This project was literally in foreclosure. They were bankrupt, and the Brody Co company bought it just before COVID started. And I think it's good to note that what they're doing here is the plan that they formulated over the last couple of years is the best way to move forward and make a good investment in the center. I just wanted to put that out there. I also didn't want to diminish the investment that Scrap Exchange has made. They have certainly spent money on their buildings, a lot of money on roof repairs, replacement, that sort of thing. As keeping up a 62-year-old building takes a lot of effort, and they've been doing an excellent job with that.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. I'm just continuing down the Q&A. Will trash management and parking lot improvements be made? I think I did answer that. Well, at least I answered about the parking lot. Trash management. Well, I think the answer to that question is it will be upgraded. I don't know what to say about how it will be managed in the future, but it's part of the overall design. Um, what is the metric for this being beneficial? Where are thriving communities demanding self-storage? Move this to 15501, not a residential neighborhood. So I can understand the sentiment. I will say, for what it's worth, Lakewood Shopping Center is not a residential neighborhood. This is a retail center, and Brodyco hopes to maintain it as a retail center. There are self storage is a the lease rates in self storage units around Durham is quite high. I mean, they don't have a lot of extra space available, and there are self storage. Um, I wouldn't say there isn't a need for it. I recognize that not everyone uses self storage. To be honest, I've only ever used self storage. I think for a total of 7 months when I was moving. Um, so I get it. I'm not a heavy user of self storage, but um, I think that one, referring to the Lakewood Shopping Center as a residential neighborhood is, I don't think that's an accurate representation of what the shopping center is. And two, I think it's important to understand that Brodyco ultimately, they are retailers. Their interest is in the retail side of it. The self storage is absolutely a use that will help them bring long term stability to the center and provide them with the, I guess, kind of economics to make this project work, given the level of investment they will need to put into the center to kind of bring it up to a modern standard and improve things that are in desperate need of being improved within the shopping center itself. Uh, what other thriving neighborhoods call self-storage innovative? I couldn't answer that question. So the southernmost building is multi-story, and the entirety of the upper levels are self-storage with fake windows. The southernmost building is the one that is planned to be multi-story. The upper levels are what would be envisioned as the self-storage. And I think also, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps the lower level on the back half of it might be part of the self-storage use. Okay. And then with fake windows, I mean, the intent would be that it doesn't look like, roll up rows of garage roll up doors. So yeah, I mean, there is an intent to have kind of architectural treatment there. Would you please repeat the zoning type change again? Yeah, absolutely. So currently the property is zoned um, commercial center or CC. And what we are looking to do is rezone it to commercial general, CG. Self-storage does not serve the surrounding community. All right. I think I have mentioned that self-storage does get a lot of use. Why are the questions and answers closed? Locks transparency. I honestly don't know how to open them, and I'm reading them right down the list. So I mean, I feel like this is fairly transparent, but I can appreciate that more transparency might be possible. You're basically saying that the storage is the cash cow to support the rest of the property. What types of studies have you done that support that thinking? So I'll just mention Brodyco has been developing properties. Even though they are a small North Carolina-based family-owned company, they've been in the retail business for over 20 years, 25 years, something like that. And like I said, their interest primarily is in retail, but they have ventured into other things, and they have taken on. Well, I will say I know they've done some Food Lion anchored shopping centers in other localities, and they have a lot of expertise and knowledge on this. So I don't know that they have done a study, but they have certainly analyzed it and believe that this use will help them with the reinvestment level they seek to put into the property. How many stories is the storage building going to be? I did answer that. well, I didn't answer it as number of stories, but a 40-foot tall building. Will the current tenants leave, dollar store, et cetera, and do they have ideas for new tenants? Yeah, I mean, I think the current tenants, I can't really speak to whether they will leave. As far as I know, there are no new tenants, end users that are uh, uh, have signed a lease or anything like
Yeah,
that. Have been approached
Nil,
by
let me chime in on that if I can have a minute. So we've had a lot of discussion. I've actually been working with Brody Co. on this site for about 2 or 3 years now, trying to work through something that worked for them. Uh, as Nil said earlier, uh, retail spaces these days want to be smaller, and they want to be smaller both to attract smaller scale local tenants, and also make them more affordable than saying you have to take 10,000 square feet or nothing. So, one of their goals is to make sure that they can attract community service retail like restaurants and barbershops and small local retail businesses and things of that nature. And to do that, they're going to be making a big investment in the parking, better lighting, upgrading the bus stop landscaping, that sort of thing. But their goal right now is to make this more of a community-based retail space, not to bring in somebody like a big national chain. So I just wanted to put that out there, Neil. Thanks for
Yeah, thank you. Someone asked, is there a plan B for if the self-storage is not approved? I mean, plan B would be to go back to the drawing board and figure that out. So I guess the answer is essentially no, there is not a plan B at the moment, but they recognize that if it doesn't get approved, they're going to have to reevaluate how to use this property. What happens to home values in neighborhoods that have self-storage? I have not studied that, but I will say that I there's been self-storage built relatively close to where I live. My home value has increased in the same time frame. So since then, so I haven't experienced it personally, but I also haven't studied this. Good job keeping food line. Have you considered a mixed-use development with apartments instead of self-storage? I'm glad you asked the question. And just to answer it flatly, no. Vertico is really not a residential developer. I don't know if they have done a residential development yet, but they specifically are not considering apartments for this project, and instead are focusing on keeping this a retail center, especially because for lack of a better term, they only own like half of it, right? So turning the front half into something significantly different than what it is now would seem to be a detriment to how the center is used overall today, and so they're not considering apartments. Someone asked, why hasn't Brodyco just taken care of their property in the first place? I mean, that's an interesting question. Brodyco acquired this property out of foreclosure, I think about 6 years ago, maybe something like that. And when they acquired the property, certainly there were existing issues at the property and existing tenants. So it's not like they would just come in and be able to overhaul the property right away. And so, I don't know that it's a fair statement to say that Vertigo hasn't taken care of this property. I think it is fair to say that in general, this property has not been taken care of. The rezoning effort that they are going through right now represents their attempt to start doing that. And, why is it coming 6 years later? Because they have to evaluate the property, have to understand what needs to be done, what needs to be fixed. I mean, obviously they have eliminated some of the space because it simply wasn't viable in its condition at that time. And this rezoning represents their attempt to do exactly that, take care of the property. Is there an example of this already in North Carolina, someplace storage above small retail? That's a great question, and I don't know of one off the top of my head. The closest thing I can think of, I mean, there's certainly shopping centers that have self storage, like the one at 751 and 54, where the what's over there, Harris Teeter is over there. That's a full-on shopping center with self-storage. I will admit it is not it's not self-storage over retail, but it's in the same center, same shopping center. Um, what else can you do in CG that you can't do in CC? And will there be a development plan? So I don't think I can describe everything that can be done in CG that can't be done in CC, but I will say the uses are. I mean, you can do a lot of the same uses. The only use that Brody Co. is seeking um, that isn't allowed in CC but is allowed in CG is the self storage use. The idea is to use the center the same way it's being used now as a retail center, reinvest in it that way, but also to add that self storage use as part of it. You also asked, will there be a development plan? Yes, there will be a development plan. Someone asked why self storage in particular, and I think I explained a couple reasons why. But one is that will really help carry the project economically to give Vertico what kind of what they need to invest at the level it will take to kind of bring this property up to kind of more of a modern level. And beyond that, self storage actually is a really kind of low intensity use as far as uses go. So by adding this new use, self storage, to the center, they expect that the shopping center will not be overwhelmed by this new use. The dominant use will still remain as a retail center, and the self storage will be kind of in the back and quietly helping bring stability to the center. Someone said they can't hear me or understand me, and I apologize about that. I have uh, lost my voice for the most part. I hope you all can hear me. Dan, I know that it seems like you can hear me, but I apologize. I generally do talk quite loudly, but I cannot at the moment.
Yeah,
And I
you're
apologize
actually
for that.
coming through fairly loud and clear on my end, Neil, so I'm not sure, it could be something on the other end, but apologies to everybody if you're not able to understand them.
Yes, I do apologize about that. Someone asked what will happen in the upper stories of the southernmost buildings. That's that self-storage use. Um, Self-storage, this is a different comment. Self-storage is a low traffic, but commercial general zoning requires high traffic, and once it's rezoned, it won't likely go back. You say you want to keep the food line around in the short term. Why are you proposing to rezone the area, including the food line? You said it would remain in the exact location where it is. Why not carve it out and give the community peace of mind? Why not guarantee El Centro's green space? Yeah, so I mean, commercial general does, as a zoning district, does not require high traffic. I suppose you could say it allows uses that would generate a lot of traffic or something like that, but there's nothing in the UDO which requires commercial general zoning to generate a lot of traffic. And I think what I said earlier is that Food Lion is going to be here in the short term. Brody Co. wants to keep them here for the long term. And the reason the Food Lion parcel the Food Lion building is associated with the rezoning is because this is one tax parcel with multiple buildings on it. Food Lion is on this tax parcel. So rather than subdivide it out, which would be kind of a unusual process here. Not that it can't be done. What Vertico is doing is rezoning the tax parcel, which is kind of generally how rezoning is done. And about El Centro's green space. So I think you're probably referring to that kind of linear park that has kind of popped up in the last, I don't know, a couple of years maybe. So that was established in concert with Brodyco. I mean, Brodyco had given some permissions for that, and that's why it's there today. And well, that's part of the reason why it's there today. So I mean, I don't know what the future of it is necessarily, but just understand like the owners have kind of, I guess, a similar thought about the uh, usefulness of the green space generally. Please share the number of attendees both on Zoom and via phone at this meeting. And I had stated that earlier. At the moment, there are 173 attendees. Um, Many residents of Lakewood do not trust your conceptual maps and believe that all of this will simply result in the self-storage units with no real upgrades or investments in the property. How can residents trust the vision will be executed as presented? Yeah, so I think this is a really fair statement because blank rezoning with no development plan could result in exactly that. So there will be a development plan associated with this rezoning, and there will be commitments on that development plan to ensure that this thing that you fear isn't what will happen. Um, so we're working on that, but I recognize this concern, and I think it's a valid one. It'll be our job as the applicant team to put forth um, a development plan that can kind of settle and give you all some certainty with respect to, at the very least, how it won't be developed, and ultimately how it will be uh, developed. Someone asked if the recording of the meeting can be shared with people who registered. So I will answer the question this way. The answer is yes. The recording will be submitted to the city of Durham, and it will therefore be a public record. And I know that the city of Durham will send that recording to you if you request it. Someone asked, instead of storage, why not residential? Why not some kind of multifamily development, particularly if you're rezoning anyway?
Neil,
So
I can jump in on that since we
go ahead.
design a lot of multifamily stuff. No, it's a fair question. But economically viable residential, meaning multifamily, would require a lot of land area. So we have done some studies for other people on this property in the past. The entirety of the property, including the food line, would have to be redeveloped in order to put multifamily out there. And again, Vertico is not a residential developer; they're a commercial developer. So that would be the trade-off. The food line would have to go in order to do multifamily.
And thanks, Dan, for that. And what are the precise boundaries of the site plan and rezoning? What I mean is that what exact stores are going to be eliminated. Um, Dan, do you have a way to answer that?
Yeah, so one of the buildings where there was a nightclub several years ago, many of you remember that the building on the as you're looking in from the street, the building to the right of the food line was actually taken down. It was a disaster. It was just blown apart. So the one existing building to the left of the food line, I believe Beauty World is in there, and
Right.
Dollar General, and a couple of other small businesses, if I recall. Those businesses in that building are the only ones that would have to move. And of course, if they wanted to come back, they could talk to Vertico about a new lease or something like that. But other than that, the only other tenant is Food Lion. As we said, the whole reason that this is being done is to generate enough revenue to do a big time renovation and entice Food Lion to stay, so that they will have more traffic.
Right. And I think this exhibit kind of shows the boundaries of the rezoning. So uh, this is I think this is Freeman's Creative is right here. Or no, that's El Futuro, I guess, right there on the end. So it's kind of everything south of there. Um, that is part of the rezoning, but it does not include Lula and Sadie's. It does not include Lakewood Social. Um, Someone asked, can I reshare the conceptual diagram? So I mean, there it is. Oh, maybe they wanted to see the other one because they're asking about the ground level retail. Sure, I can do that. It'll just give me a minute and I will. Um, Someone asked, is it correct to say that self-storage is critical for the revitalization to be financially viable? And I would say that is certainly the way that Brody Co. has evaluated it. Okay, so I will just mention that multiple people said that the chat is not on. Again, I apologize about that. I literally got a message on chat when I read the first comment, but I'm not discounting that it might not be on for everyone, and I really can't say anything other than that because I really don't know how to fix the problem.
And Neil, maybe to clarify, there's not only a chat button, but folks are actually posting to there's a Q&A button on the bottom of my screen. So maybe that's the difference. And that's where that's where the dialogue is coming in.
Yeah, that's true. So why not housing? I think that has been answered. Why a storage facility? I will say I think we answered this one as well. Someone said the chat is enabled for me and not everyone. Okay, I apologize about that. Is self-storage the wait? If self-storage is the only reason for the rezoning proposal, please explain in more how this provides the cash infusion needed to upgrade Lakewood. Yeah, so it's not that the rezoning or the self-storage itself provides a cash infusion. The level of investment that Brodico needs to put into the development itself to kind of upgrade the parking lot, overhaul that, to create the new retail spaces is pretty significant. And so they're looking at this based on how any business person would. Um, what kind of uses would make sense given what kind of rents they want to get, what kind of tenants they want to attract, which I think Dan has mentioned. They're kind of looking at community businesses rather than like big national chains, right? That's what they want to keep this center operating as. So the self-storage component is a stable tenant, so to speak, that does provide let's call it a good rent roll. Helps them underwrite the project. Maybe that's a better way to describe it. I mean, there's no two ways about it. What they're hoping to do is going to take some money, and they're hoping to recoup on their investment. What's the current lease terms of Food Lion, and how much is left on the lease? I had a feeling this question would come up, and I'll say I don't represent Brody Co. or Food Lion with respect to the leases. I honestly have no idea, and I would also just say it's not necessarily relevant to the rezoning request itself. It is relevant to the overall vision in the sense that Brody Co. is hoping to keep Food Lion here long term, but I don't know the particulars about their lease. And there's another question about the lease. Has Brodico had any other ideas other than storage? So Brodico is they have done several retail locations across. I'm going to say North Carolina. I don't know if they've done much outside of North Carolina. They have, decades of experience in this. Have they considered things other than storage? Yes, they didn't work out, and so that's why that's why we are where we are. After the area is rezoned, what is to stop Brodico from changing the plans for use? Yeah, and I think I answered this earlier. Ultimately, the answer to that question is the development plan and how the parameters that are placed in the development plan, if the rezoning is approved, that would run with the zoning of the land. Will public transportation remain? A great question. There's an existing bus stop on Chapel Hill Road, and yes, it will remain. Did Brodico consider adding additional retail storefronts in the space that is shown as self-storage? I didn't discuss that with them, but I will tell you that is the back of the building. You have to approach that from the rear. That, in my personal opinion, does not seem like a real viable location for a retail front. This is not a 360 type of approach for this building. That is definitely the back kind of service area, so to speak, of the building. So I don't think that's a really great retail location to begin with. I don't know if Brodico had evaluated that same way, or maybe they have some other thoughts on that, but I appreciate the question. Someone asked if we can show the elevations from Jersey Street. I don't actually have an exhibit for that, and that reminds me, I was intending to show previous elevations. So that's kind of the stretch. So uh, I'll use Food Lion as the common point because that exists today and it's shown where it exists today. So you'd have these, I'll call them single story inline retail. That will be north of Food Lion, and then south of Food Lion. So out this way would be Chapel Hill. Oops, sorry. Um, you've got the multi-story building. So the bottom level down here, right? That's the retail front, and then above is where the self-storage use would take place. Has a developer explored other options that would be allowed under the current zoning? Yes, they have. Vertigo is only a part owner. Who else owns the property? Where are they located? And when did they purchase? Vertigo owns the property that is the subject of this rezoning. The rest of the Lakewood Shopping Center, well, I say, yeah, Dan, the rest of it is owned by essentially Scrap Exchange, right? I think Lula and Sadie's is not, technically part of the Lakewood Shopping Center. That's owned by a different party, and Lakewood Social also owned by a different party. But generally speaking, the rest of Lakewood is owned by the Scrap Exchange.
Mhm.
Um, how are you addressing stormwater? How are you addressing a parking lot that is underutilized? How are you addressing access for walking and biking? Do you have potential tenants for the commercial space? What makes self-storage a good economic option? Have you surveyed the neighborhood about what retail and uses they would want? Okay, so Dan, I want to turn some of this over to you, but let me answer a couple of them first. How are you addressing a parking lot that is underutilized? That is the perfect question to explain exactly why this center needs to be revitalized. The parking lot is underutilized because people aren't going here, right? And so one of the aspects of this is to bring, action and excitement back to the shopping center so people will use the parking lot for something other than drag racing and burnouts. The other part of that is redoing the parking lot itself and kind of changing its layout. One, to accommodate pedestrians better, because as it sits right now, essentially just a surface parking lot with stripes on it. Vertico would want to put sidewalks in there, specific pedestrian paths in there, and create, I would say, barriers. The landscape islands that you see in parking lots, and new lights and things like that, to hopefully discourage people from using the parking lot the way that it has been used, let's say after hours. And there at this time there are no potential tenants for the commercial space. I think we have talked at length so far about self-storage and why it's a good economic option. And have we surveyed the neighborhood about what retail and uses they would want? I mean, I'm not going to phrase it that way. I wouldn't say we went and sent a survey out to the neighborhood, but we certainly had meetings with area stakeholders. We've certainly done market research, and Brodyco envisions this site being used as it currently is used as a retail center, and specifically one that can accommodate community businesses, right? Small businesses. What they are not looking to do is turn this into an area for your national chains. They're not hoping to get Chipotle, I guess is a fair statement. They're hoping to kind of attract some of those kind of small businesses that make Durham. And Dan, can you maybe talk a little bit about the stormwater or whatever else you can address?
Sure. Well, inherently, the site is already about 99.99% impervious surface, and we're actually going to be reducing that. So we're going to add more landscape islands. We'll add some tree islands, some greenery around the new buildings, and that sort of thing. So we will be reducing the impervious surface, and just by dint of that. Reducing the impervious will reduce the runoff slightly, and it'll improve the runoff quality slightly as well. I don't know if you answered the question about walking and biking, but certainly our concept plan does show, and we will do because the city requires it these days for good reason. Uh, we'll be, building some good sidewalk connections out to the adjacent streets where today I think you basically just have to navigate your way through the parking lot and hopefully not get run over by a car trying to back out. And there will be bicycle parking as well. That's not only required by the ordinance, but it's a good thing to do.
Thanks, Dan. Someone asked if we know what's happening with the church on the corner of Bivens and Chapel Hill, and I can say that I do not. It's also not part of um, this rezoning or this project, so I can't really speak to that. So someone mentioned near the beginning of the call, you mentioned that food line can stay at least in the short term. Can you shed light on why that qualifier was necessary and what could potentially lead to the shopping center losing food line? So actually, what I said was Food Lion will be staying at least in the short term, and by that I meant because they have a lease. And what could potentially lead to the shopping center losing the Food Lion? I think I mentioned earlier. Our understanding is that this is a marginally performing Food Lion. It is performing. I don't want to suggest otherwise, but the hope is that you don't lose Food Lion because of reinvestment in the center, which, as has been mentioned, there hasn't been much of that um, uh, in let's just say the lifetime of the project. That building that Food Lion is in was built in the late 50s, early 60s, and that's what it is. Why would you not pursue a mixed-use rezoning and a more transformative plan for the site that includes housing, retail, restaurants? It's a prime parcel on a main transit line. Yeah, and I think some of the spatial issues with that are kind of answer the question. Brody Co. does not own the entire shopping center. That is part of the challenge here. They can't simply turn their back to the rest of the shopping center. The only signage for the Lakewood Shopping Center is out on Chapel Hill. I think that's correct. It's out on Chapel Hill. Yet scrap exchange is all the way in the back. This is an important. Lakewood is an important currently plays an important role in the community. A lot of people go here for support. And yes, those supportive businesses could continue to remain if we, if someone did build a mixed use center or whatever on this site. However, the whole site would operate quite differently, and that seems to be a detriment. Ultimately, the goal. I mean, I think it's fair to say the goal is to revitalize the Lakewood Shopping Center as a shopping center, not to transform it into something else. Is Vertico exploring other development options other than self-storage for the space? I think we've answered that. Can you comment on why a change of zoning being requested rather than a special use permit a zoning exception for a more defined plan? Yeah, because the current zoning doesn't allow self-storage, whether you have a special use permit or not. Current zoning does not allow self-storage. That's why we're seeking rezoning. A zoning exception, I'm not sure what that refers to. We are rezoning the property, uh, you know, so that the self-storage use would be allowed there. We're not seeking an exception from the UDO. We're following the UDO. How about attracting high-quality retail instead of self-storage? That's exactly what they're trying to do. The high-quality retail is not looking for retail space these days that is as deep as what exists there today. Those are big spaces, and people simply can't fill them. What are the floor to floor heights so we can understand the scale of the building, overall height? I think I mentioned the overall height is going to be 40 feet. I can't necessarily answer what the floor to floor is, but we're talking about a 40-foot building overall. What kind of outdoor lighting? Well, also, before I go on, I know there's a lot of hands up. There also are a lot of questions in the Q&A, like a lot. So I'm trying to go through both. I do intend to get to people who've raised their hand. I also see that we're approaching 7 o'clock, and I know the meeting notice said that the meeting will go till 7 o'clock. We're just going to go beyond 7 o'clock because clearly 7 o'clock does not give us enough time. But at some point, I think I'm going to have to switch over to the hands raised, and I am going to be a little bit more judicious about which questions in the Q&A we're going to answer it if they've already been answered. What kind of outdoor lighting will be in the parking lot? What kind of outreach have you done to other tenants in the shopping center, scrap exchange, et cetera? Outdoor lighting, in the parking lot, it is there are I don't know how to answer what kind, but I will say it'll be the lighting, generally speaking, that so lighting is regulated by the Durham Development Ordinance. So lighting will have to meet those standards. What specifically would that lighting look like? We have not gotten to that level of detail yet, so I can't exactly answer that. Have we reached out to other tenants in the shopping center? Yes. You mentioned Scrap Exchange specifically. Yes, we've been in conversation with Scrap Exchange specifically and others. Is there a modification of the proposal that would be possible without change in zoning? I'm going to answer that question this way. The current zoning does not require the property to be used or look the way it does today. So under the current zoning, it is possible to redevelop the site to something completely different than what it is today. It is not possible to establish self-storage on the site without rezoning. And that is, as I've mentioned, one of the goals here. Can you address less desirable uses allowed in the proposed zone that are not allowed in the current zone? Like, I think payday lenders or something like that. Yeah, so there are uses that are allowed in um, CG zoning district that we'll call them less desirable that we will eliminate and prohibit as part of the zoning from here. Will food line facade be updated? That is a great question. I know that Brodyco hopes to upgrade that, but that I think is food line kind of controls what will happen there. So they can't tell you for sure it will be updated. But I know that that is certainly a desire of Brodyco. Where is the access to storage area in the back or front? There seems to be very little traffic area in the back and no parking spots. Um, yeah, so Dan, uh, can you maybe address
Yeah.
that?
It'll, the existing driveway off of Jersey where, uh, trucks and cars come in will remain. The access for any loading to the storage will be on the Jersey side, but there will be some side doors as well. There'll be a nice entrance to the building so people can walk in and go upstairs and go to their spaces. So, Jersey side would be loading and the side would be a, sort of a person entry door.
Thank you. Someone asked if we could talk about the additional plots of land that Brodyco owns in Lakewood and how they would interplay with the plans for the storage facility. So just to be clear, the Lakewood Shopping Center, Brodyco owns only one parcel in the Lakewood Shopping Center, and that's the subject of the rezoning. So I mean, I really can't speak to this question specifically. Certainly, Brodyco might have other holdings, but they're not part of this rezoning. They're not part of Lakewood Shopping Center. They're not part of this rezoning or this project. What is the total square footage to be added? You have to rezone because it is 2 stories. So the height is not necessarily a issue under either zone, CG or CC. So the height is not doesn't really play a factor into the need to rezone. It's really the use of self storage and the total square footage to be added. So I think I mentioned earlier we haven't necessarily figured all. We don't have all of those details, right? But the shops on the southern side, I think today are about 32,000 square feet, and that would be reduced. Um, I think I mentioned when I showed that it's kind of maybe a third of that would make up the new retail spaces that are right sized, and the northern shops that have been demolished but were north of Food Line. I think that was about 12,000 square feet, and so in the new iteration, it'll be closer to 9,000 square feet. What has Food Lion told the investment group about what they need to stay in this location? I mean, I don't know that they have told them anything specifically. This is kind of part of it's just the business cycle. Brodyco is hoping to entice Food Lion to stay longer by investing in the area. Um, have you surveyed the community for input about what we'd like to see? I think I've answered this one. The rezoning is approved and the area described as ground level retail be repurposed by the owner to ground level storage spaces. If so, can there be a guarantee in writing that that would not happen? Yeah, so again, that's something that would have to be included in the development plan, but I think that is possible and certainly intended. What sort of retail are you thinking would fit or be interested in coming in? I mean, small scale kind of community businesses and restaurants. You know, that's what they envision. What is the redevelopment's relationship with the scrap exchange and its properties? I understand that Lula and Sadie's is a historic property. Do they own it? Where are you considering putting self-storage and why in the middle of a cluster of neighborhoods? I think we've answered most of these. I will just say that, we have been in contact with Scrap Exchange. I think it's safe to say that they would welcome an update, particularly to the parking lot. I don't want to speak for Scrap Exchange, but the relationship between this redevelopment and Scrap Exchange, we understand that uh, uh, this, uh, this parcel is important to Scrap Exchange for access signs, all sorts of things, and so the intent there would be to maintain kind of that interconnectivity, but there's nothing. I mean, Scrap Exchange is not involved in this rezoning. House Street is so street, so self storage will face part of the neighborhood. All right. It seems clear from your introduction that you're not familiar with Lakewood. Freeman's Creative is not a service, but a retail space. Also, why would you zone an urban shopping center to the zoning commercial general, which is established to provide for a wide variety of commercial activities of varying scales that are designed to be served by major thoroughfares and other similar high volume rights of way. Also, would the public see the graphical development plan prior to any rezoning? Right now, you're only sharing a very obtuse textual development plan. A lot to unpack there. So I apologize for misstating the exact nature of Freeman's Creative. My understanding, yes, they are a retail space, but they certainly do provide a safe space for the queer community. I would call that a service and a place that people go for support. But reasonable minds could disagree. Um, the commercial general, I think the description that you have there, you might have pulled from the UDO or other planning documents, and that might be the general idea for a commercial general district. But this would be a commercial general district with a development plan that would eliminate several of the uses that aren't currently allowed on under the current zoning, which, by the way, there are a number of uses that are currently allowed under the current zoning. So from the zoning standpoint, I can't stress this enough. The reason for the rezoning is to add self-storage to the mix of uses. That's why. What would the rear elevation of the facility look like given consideration of Jersey Street residents? Multi-story would also impact Jersey Street. Yeah, I think this is a fair point, and I don't have any kind of exhibit related to what they'll look like from the back. This is something that I will definitely take to the clients and see, if we can't get a complete answer on that. How does self-storage facility support the designation of the area as a transit opportunity area? The custom and traffic for self-storage seems antithetical to that designation. Um, Transit opportunity area, in my opinion, is an area that allows people to get there via transit. As I mentioned, there is a transit line there that's going to be maintained, so people will be able to get here um, with um, by transit. I would also disagree. I mean, I think I mentioned the only time I've ever used self storage is when I was renting. I had too much stuff to fit in space. I needed space to put my stuff before I moved into a different space. So I do think that a transit opportunity area, the self storage use is not necessarily antithetical to transit opportunity area. Um, Moreover, self storage is only part of the development that Brody Co. is envisioning here. It would still be a retail location. So to chalk this up to it's only self storage, I want to be clear that that's not the case here. And so there will be certainly other uses that people who ride the bus will, I hope, would want to um, patron. Um, why not envision a new plan for revitalization that works within the current zoning? So, I mean, we've looked at that as well. The self storage is important to Vertico's project. Can you speak to the need for more self storage in the area? There seems to be a ton of self storage options. 15501, they have ample space. Um, Self storage is used widely, and to my knowledge, there's not a whole lot of available self storage space. Yeah, I think it's probably true that if you go to a self storage site and ask for a unit, they probably have one. But if all of the self storage spaces are uh, very highly leased out, that suggests that there might be a need for more. Now, you know, I get the sense that the self storage use, people are skeptical of it and maybe don't like it, and I appreciate that. But I think we've answered a lot of questions and seen a lot of questions about concerns related to self storage and the need for it, the desire for it. And I appreciate the concern, but this is not like, I mean, I don't know what specific self storage you're referring to on 15501. I guess ample storage, as you've mentioned, ample space. I know they're on 15501. Specifically, that's not what this will look like. This is not, the barrack style single story rows of roll up doors, row after row. That's not what we're talking about here. This is going to look a lot more like an office. Self-storage has been shown to contribute a massive amount of greenhouse gases and other environmental harms. What are the plans to explore and mitigate this potential impact? On another note, this feels like a sharp contrast to Reuse Arts District. How can Brody align a bit more? Um, so I would say I would be very interested to see whatever studies or reports there are about self-storage contributing to massive amounts of greenhouse gases. This is a new uh, statement for me, so I'm not aware of it and not prepared to respond to that specifically. And uh, the the second part of the statement is that this feels like a sharp contrast to Reuse Arts District. Reuse Arts District, I believe, is the official name of the scrap exchange entity that owns the land, the rest of the shopping center. Um, I don't actually view this as a sharp contrast to what is currently on the ground there. Essentially, what Birdie is doing here is adding self storage and maintaining a retail location. So it's actually going to operate very similar to the way it operates today, which I don't think it's fair to say that the way it operates today is a sharp contrast to the reuse arts district. Has Protico considered building on the parking lot? Seems very large and opportunity for density. Um, the parking is necessary for the retail aspect of this. I mean, the parking lot is underutilized today. That's kind of the point. The retail center is underutilized today. The hope is to fill the parking lot with new patrons by reinvesting in the retail portion of it and attracting new energy into the center. So, I mean, I don't disagree with the statement that, you know, reusing a surface parking lot for more density can be an attractive way to redevelop sites. But for how Brodyco envisions this site being used in the future, the parking lot is still going to be necessary because it is, after all, a retail center.
Yeah, it would be the death of the Food Lion if we built in the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I think the questions. I mean, there are several. I don't want to. I want to get to some people who've raised their hands. There are several still in the Q&A, but they're getting a little repetitive. So I'm going to go to Doris Rouse, whose hand is raised. You should be able to unmute yourself. And are you there, Doris? Doris, you appear to be unmuted, but I cannot hear you. Dan, are you hearing it? Okay. So I apologize about that. I do know that you had sent some questions and comments in the Q&A, and I would encourage you to send more in there. But in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next hand raised. Donna Frederick, you should be on. You should be able to unmute yourself.
I can be unmuted. I can be unmuted. Am I unmuted? Okay.
Yes, you are, and I can hear you.
Yeah, quick question.
Yeah.
I know you answered the question, explore other options for that area other than self-storage, and how much, effort, like I say, out of the box, we have an opportunity here. And I understand we don't want to lose Food Line, which you said that may or may not have nothing to do with what's going on. But self-storage to me is not what this area needs right now to revitalize it, and how much output has been, reaching across other types of development. I've been at that shopping center way, way back since it was Busy Street, that whole Sox where Scrap Exchange. And a lot of community is changed, but the area is changing. Little shops are coming. So self-storage isn't something that would make me go to that shopping center. That's not going to draw me there. So if you want to draw people, put something there that people want to go to. Self-storage is not it. I think we keep hearing that from the people on the call.
No,
So
I disagree. I disagree. That is not the way I would characterize it. The self-storage use is not the use that is going to draw people to this shopping center. That's not the intent. The self-storage use helps underwrite the investment needed to update the retail space. And the new retail space is ultimately what will drive people to the shopping center. The self-storage will get used, but self-storage is a low traffic producer. I mentioned that earlier. The driving the traffic to the shopping center is not the self-storage. The self-storage is a way to help underwrite the significant investment that Vertigo hopes to put into the center. So, I mean, I would disagree, and I hope others don't have the notion that what we're saying here is that self-storage is necessary to revitalize, and bring people to the area. It is the way. It is self-storage is one of the ways that helps bring in a steady source of income for the shopping center, so that it can be revitalized. Nicole Easley, your hand is up. Oh, hold on. All right, there. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hey, so
I
I have
can
a
hear
couple
you.
of
Thank you.
questions. Thank you. If Food Lion elects not to renew their lease, will Brody seek a new grocer for the plaza?
Oh, I think it's too early to say that. I don't know specifically. The plan here is to have Food Lion renew its lease. Alfredo, that would be more retail.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Waylon, you have your hand up. You should be able to unmute yourself. I'm not hearing from Waylon, so I will move on. Jennifer Albright, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi.
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you for joining us.
Question. Do you have any idea the total number of additional retail spaces that would be offered? Taking the, given how you're going to reduce their space, are we going to end up with 5 storefronts or 10 storefronts?
Dan, do you know? That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, there will be less retail square footage in the spaces that are being removed, but I think it's probably correct to say that you'll end up with more retailers.
Yeah, at this point, it's just going to be a matter of how it's sliced and diced. So if a lot of small retailers come to them and small businesses, there'll be more businesses. And if there are fewer, there'll be fewer. But I think that happens at leasing. You know, when you go to a new building, there's no walls inside, and depending on who those tenants might be, they will carve up the space that makes sense for them.
So it'll be like a huge rectangular box then, and then people will say, I want 5,000 square feet, I want 9,000, whatever. I mean, because part of the reason,
or 1,200.
Or 1,200. I mean, it seems that the reason that one of the ways that this could improve our neighborhood is it offers more services to the neighborhood, and what's going to draw more people to come there. I have no illusions that the storage space is a great way to generate revenue. It's obvious by what's happening in Durham that there's lots of expensive storage spaces being built. So it's a great passive income source. So that makes sense that to use the money to do the development. I also think though that there has to be some way that Brody Co. has to give back to the community something that the community needs so that they feel that they are part of this process, and it's not just a development program for an income generating machine for Brody Co. And if that means more green space or helping with Food Line to upgrade their facade, creating more green spaces in the parking lot, there has to be something that you guys can say, we're giving this to the neighborhood because we are committed to the health of the neighborhood. And I don't mean the medical health. I mean, I'm talking about the well-being of the neighborhood.
No, understood. It's a great point. Thank you. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Sharon Roos, you have your hand up. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi. This is actually Sharon's husband, Barry.
Okay.
And I appreciate you opening up for questions. I really do appreciate that. My question is, will all of the community involvement discussions be like this one? I think the community would like a more open format. Honestly, I feel like this format is more of you talking to us and then managing the communication. Will there be another meeting where we can meet together and there'll be a microphone we can walk up to and hear other folks' questions? And also, you mentioned that this information is going to get back to Durham. Is Durham going to get this communication plus all of the Q&A questions?
Yeah, the whole recording goes to them. Yeah, absolutely. And about having a different format for a community meeting. So I think I've mentioned we've had some meetings with other area stakeholders. This is kind of the format that is, let's say, specified by the City of Durham for an official neighborhood meeting, right? So that's what this is. In my experience, Brody Co. has been open to having community conversations. So I can't tell you specifically that yes, they'll have another meeting, but I feel pretty confident that they're open-minded about that, and that's something they've been willing to talk to folks in the community. So I don't see why.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Durham had dictated the format for this meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you are required to have, let's call it the official neighborhood meeting for rezoning is required to be done virtually. You can have an in-person component, but if you do, you still have to have the virtual component. And what I have found is that a hybrid meeting with an in-person and virtual is very hard to manage and not very good. So we're doing it as a virtual meeting, which is the requirement. And as I've mentioned, Brody Co. has been very open-minded about meeting with the community and talking with the community. So I suspect that they're open to that going forward as well, but I haven't had that conversation with them specifically.
Okay, but thank you very much for doing this and for taking that in mind. I believe that the community would like something different from this format, honestly. But thank you
Sure.
very much for doing this.
I understand. Thank you. Kenneth Bausel, I think I probably butchered, but
Hey, that's me, Bostel, but thank you for trying.
you're right.
I did see earlier someone mentioned that Brody Co. had some other assets in Lakewood. I do see that they own from your website or Brody Co.'s website 2101 House Avenue, which is, I guess, 5 acres directly behind the scrap exchange. I think, I agree with all the comments before about really making sure that there are some concessions to the neighborhood or something to benefit our neighborhood and to give back, and also a different forum where we can really have a good back and forth. And part of that too is what is Brody Co.'s plan with that 5 acres directly behind the scrap exchange?
I think I mean I hear what you're saying, and I will say whatever their plan is with that 5 acres is not germane to the rezoning that they're doing now. I mean, it's not part of this project. I don't. I mean, I would like to limit the conversation to specifically what the rezoning is about. That's not to say that there can't be a discussion about that, but I mean, I don't want to confuse the two. A 5 acre parcel that they own behind Scrap Exchange is unrelated to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I guess I respectfully disagree that those properties are tangentially connected, right? So I see them as being a package, but understand what you're saying.
Okay, well, I appreciate the perspective. Carrie Benoit Salimi. Probably butchered that too. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay,
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you for joining.
2 parts. We're basically talking about the space between Food Lion and the water feature, the water stone feature. Is that what we're talking about?
No, here,
Scrap exchange. There's a scrap exchange. There's a number of small businesses. There's
someone did ask me to share the image again, so I wanted to do that, but
I don't know that I can tell. I looked at something and I don't know that I can tell precisely.
The blue area is where Food Lion exists today. The
Okay.
rezoning area is kind of this. So it goes beyond Food Lion. There used to be some inline shops here. They're no longer there, but that's what it includes. It does not include kind of
Any of those things over there. Okay, that's
right.
So then, sir, how that is what I'm thinking. So you would take out everything on the other side of Food Lion also.
Well, these shops have already
Dollar
been
General.
demolished.
No, the other side, it says climate control storage.
Yeah, right.
Okay,
right.
so I see. So you would take out the Dollar General, and there's 1 or 2 empty storefronts there, and there's a small clothing store and a beauty supply store.
Yeah.
Those would all go away.
That's the area that's part of this redevelopment that is being proposed. Yes.
Where's the Food Line?
The Food Line is the blue part. Well, I'm sitting here with 2 other neighbors. So
Sure.
So I'm just saying. So the blue space is Food Line. So because my other question was I was imagining it only being to the right of the Food Lion on this drawing that we were talking about, and yeah, and so I had wondered what was the percentage or the ratio of commercial and because the thing that I had seen online before was way not this detailed. And I think for many people, it's imperative that Food Lion remain because there are people
we've definitely heard that.
who cannot get other people who do not have cars, they have nowhere else really effectively to get food.
We definitely heard that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sally Hodges Copel. You
Hi.
should be, yep,
Yes.
hi.
I wanted to ask, I think earlier you mentioned that Food Lion is included in the rezoning request because it's part of, I think you said a tax parcel, and that's how this is usually done. But if we're hearing from residents that are really concerned about Food Lion or another grocery store remaining there, is it technically possible for the owner to submit a request that does not include rezoning?
Well, I think it's technically possible, but I also think it's worth mentioning that doing so doesn't guarantee anything about the Food Lion. The current
Yeah, I
zoning
understand that.
of the parcel